So, or actually I see Dahlia, so that makes 9. So we're going to go ahead and call this work session to order because we've had a very patient audience waiting for the board's discussion on something that's quite important to our employees. So I will go ahead and turn this over to the most senior person I see sitting next to me, which is Marty Smith, who can then tee up this work session.
Let me, before Marty gets all the fun, welcome back, Marty. It's first day back. I hope you enjoyed being away for your birthday. I want to seriously say, I'm sorry to make folks wait. We were doing important work, and honestly, staff told me the student success was going to take longer. I'm like, oh, we'll get it done in just a couple hours. So I'm learning, still learning that sometimes we need more time. And by no means, if we, as this board determines after the presentation, if we need more time for discussion, we have Thursday night for a work session. We still have, I mean, I'm just being honest, we still have time. You guys will have to tell me the final date in the board, the final moment. I want to also say I appreciate the folks that are out here. I had a town hall with invited folks on the BA lanes, and there were multiple messages. One was appreciation for listening. And when I got here, I listened and I added a step. In the fall, I came and brought a 3-year 3% bonus. The board asked me to look at an item of menu of items, and we have that. And what I brought you tonight is my best thinking, my and my team's best collective thinking. Is it going to make everybody behind me happy? Absolutely not. Is it going to make every board member happy? Absolutely not. It's a balance between trying to determine when the board went with a market-based compensation strategy, and then we did that strategy, most of our employees were found to be under market. We've had some of our employees found to be over market. What do we do with those employees to show that we still value them while having a market-based approach? And that's a tough conversation, and I wanted to say it up front. It is for our staff. I know if I were in that, I'd be here too tonight going, what? And that was part of what I learned from the town hall discussion. Part of it is, one argument is substantive. Hey, my bachelor's, master's, what's the big difference? Even if the market values it different, but that's what we did as this board and a prior superintendent, and I came in the middle of a market-based approach, and that's what we've done, and it's resonated, that market approach, with our community and board of supervisors. This is the first budget that we've brought forward that's been completely endorsed by the county executive, and we'll see what the board of supervisors does with it, but I think paying our people under market is a resonating message. The other thing I heard from the town hall that I want to say is the other one of substance, again, the bachelor's versus a master's, but the other was just timing. Where was the notice? Where was the heads up? And it was important for me. I came here as an intern in 1993 and then a teacher in 94. Many of the folks on these BA lanes actually came just a few years before me, which was right when Bud had to freeze teacher scales when we had the recession in the early 90s. So a lot of our folks feel like they got frozen at the beginning, and now they're getting frozen at the end. So what I've tried to do in the ultimate proposal that you'll see that I put forward is to continue to give more time for a heads up to make a transition. You know, in the end, I know the board has to make a hard decision, and it's tough. And it's tough to make decisions every day in this job. I respect the people here. I respect the differences of opinion that may exist when it's over. What I brought is more generous than what I had in the fall, and I think is a balance between trying to maintain our discussion around paying people under market to market while still recognizing the needs of folks who've served us for a long time and deserve recognition and deserve some kind of compensation and acknowledgement for their work. So we look forward to the discussion, and I hope the presentation is helpful for you as you make this decision.
Thank you, Dr. Brabrand. I do want to reiterate something for my colleagues as we do listen to this presentation. During the pre-meeting, it was shared with Mr. Wilson and myself that while we were initially talking about 417 teachers who fall in the bachelor lanes between step 19 and 23, Overall, Fairfax County, out of its 15,000 plus teachers, over 4,000 fall within a bachelor designation. So the 417 is only 10% of our current employees that have a bachelor's degree. And so what's going to be part of, I think, Dr. Brabrand, quite honestly, a larger discussion is we have over 4,000 teachers with a bachelor's degree in this system. And for the 25% who are being affected by whatever decision we make, step 19 to 23, it goes far more than those 417. And that what might make today's presentation a part one, part two. I mean, part one might be, what are we doing about our step 19 to 23 right now that we were looking at, how do we address this in fairness? But I do think it's really important that the full impact of what we're talking about here goes far beyond 417 employees. So with that, Mr. Smith, did you want to tee this up? Because I know Mr. Drager did a great job with our pre-meeting, but I'm just going to defer to you.
Well, in the interest of time, we will allow Mr. Drager, who's the Director of Business Services and Human Resources, to go right ahead. But I do want to just kind of share that how quickly change occurs in Fairfax County. The last time we had a conversation, we had a whole different cast of characters up here talking about BA lanes. And so we've got Mr. Drager, who is here. Of course, Dr. Ramey is out. We have Kathleen Waltz, who's been working very closely with Human Resources and the Office of Financial Services. Kathleen Waltz is our Executive Director for the Office of Professional Learning and Family Engagement. We also have Lee Burden, who is our new Assistant Superintendent for Financial Services. And we've been working very closely together to create some solutions based on board input from our last meeting. So today we're going to go through some of those recommendations, those options with the costing, and then share the recommendation from staff.
Thank you and good evening. And thank you, Megan, for framing the conversation, because, of course, we do kind of the purpose of these slides is looking at that 419 staff on the BA lanes, knowing that if we don't take any action as of today or at some point this year, they will not have a salary increase for next year. So what we kind of want to work through, which we've kind of covered, is the current status, and we can recap some more of the work to date that's occurred since the board last met and discussed this in November. We want to talk about a recap, or reshow, or reshare the teacher placement on the scale for those individuals, cover the cohort and tuition reimbursement update, and then recap kind of the options. We came with a recommendation in November. Some different options were discussed at that time, so we're bringing that back to the board, and then look at the ultimate recommendation in terms of moving forward with this group. So just to recap, again, in July, we issued a step increase for these employees for FY18. We have worked with our partners in OPLFE in terms of development in partnership with George Mason University on a cohort program and reinstating tuition reimbursement. And we have, again, taken a look at those options that were shared with the board back in November and have costed that information for review here this evening. And as Dr. Brabrand was mentioning, we had that town hall conversation with the teachers on the BA lanes back in March. And then, of course, we'll wrap up here and hopefully reach some consensus on a recommended course of action. Oh, sorry. Okay. We've had this, shared this before with some budget work sessions, but we would just want to bring it back to the board in terms of the distribution of where teachers are on our BA plus 15, and rest of the pay lanes. As Megan pointed out, you can see across those BA lanes, we have about 4,100 teachers on those BA lanes. But what you see in the white box there are those currently on step 19 and higher, who are part of that conversation, or part of the staff that we're having that conversation about this evening. The other kind of chart there to the left just shows the lanes, or kind of the distribution broken up a little bit further, kind of grouped as steps. So 1 through 5, 6 through 10, 11 through 15 in the lower left-hand corner. Going to kick it over to Kathleen Waltz, our partner from OPLFE, real quick, just to provide kind of an update on the work that's occurred since November with the tuition sharing program and also the reinstatement of tuition reimbursement.
Thank you, Michael. So we wanted to share some high-level information in regard to the GMU Master's cohort, as well as the tuition reimbursement program. So if you read across, beginning with the spring 2018 semester and look across that row, we currently have 44 teachers who are enrolled and starting a cohort program as of this spring. We were able to offer 3 different options for those master's programs through the Advanced Studies in Teaching and Learning with George Mason Rasmussen University in teacher leadership, designing digital learning, and then the third were individual concentrations, depending on the teacher's current position or interest in a specific content area. If you look at tuition reimbursement, we had 186 of 241 requests we were able to fill, and the demand far outweighed the resources available to us during this semester, but we know that we will continue to increase that funding over time. So then if we project into fall of 2018, you can see the number of teachers who are interested, those applications that are in process, as well as a marketing plan that we're pulling together currently. We also have been working closely with Mason to expand the cohort options for teachers and to provide 8 different degree options. And there will be 16 concentrations alone for the advanced studies in teaching and learning. And so we can allow for 130 participants next fall. In tuition reimbursement, our proposed funding is $0.5 million. So that has been very successful for us during this semester, and we anticipate additional requests for reimbursement. Thank you, Michael.
So on the next slide, we're recapping the options that were discussed at the November work session. And actually, option A was 3% bonus for 3 years with no step. That was actually the recommendation that came back in November at that time as a follow-up to the July work session. And then it was discussed, some different options were mentioned. Option B, a 3.5% bonus for 3 years. Option C, a 3% bonus for 2 years and step for 1 year. An option D, which was a 3% bonus for 1 year and step for 2 years, and an option B, which was no bonus and a step for 3 years. So that was the information that staff took back and looked at in terms of costing. Another piece is that when this was reviewed in November, it was all kind of discussed in the context of additional work or steps or bonuses beyond FY18. So I'm progressing to the next slide in terms of the cost information. One of the things we did want to capture here is the FY 2018 step increase that was granted to these employees for $1.1 million. You see the cost of the different options there, and the chart's trying to show the one-time bonus costs along with the growing recurring step cost over that time period. So if you look at option A, you have 1.1 for the FY18 step, and then you see the bonus row of 1.1 across for 19, 20, and 21 for option A for that 3% bonus. Option B, of course, was a 3.5% bonus for 3 years. So you can see the cost grows from 1.1 for the 3% to the 1.3 for the 3.5%. And then option C, D, and E start to introduce those steps. Option C, a step in FY19. Option D, a step in FY19 and FY20. And option E, a step across all those years. So the recommendation that staff is bringing this evening is, after the town hall forum and looking at the options that were discussed in the fall, no, since that time, is looking at granting 2 more steps for all eligible employees, kind of the 419 employees captured in that white box on the earlier slide. The eligible employees would include those on step 19 and higher, and I want to correct an error here. It says as of FY 2019, but that would be as of their current step placement of FY 2018. So a line back to that chart would be as of FY 2018. Again, we hope that this recommendation delivers kind of overall 3 years of stability, taking into account that step that was granted for FY18. And some of the feedback we heard was that while the bonuses were nice, one concern is that they're not increasing salary or earnings and are not retirement eligible. So the step honors the increase in salary for retirement eligible earnings for those individuals. And of course, we would continue to still honor movement between the lanes. So anyone still advancing their education to the plus 15, plus 30 or master pay lanes, as they meet those criteria, could still apply and be moved into those pay lanes. So the last slide here is just kind of now recapping the cost information, but with that recommended option at the top. Again, capturing the step for FY18 and recommending a step for 2 more years for FY19 and FY20. And there are some additional slides here, but we weren't planning on to cover those. As part of that's just capturing some information that was requested at the past of the board, so we can certainly look at that if we want. But again, looking for some consensus now just from the board in terms of those options for the 419 teachers on those BA lanes and moving forward for the FY19 so that hopefully they can see a salary increase.
So if I could just offer my final comments on this. I do feel I listened to the folks who came to Robinson. They did not get everything. Their preference would be continue to keep the scales as they were. I did, however, offer far more than what I offered in the fall, which was just a bonus. Letting folks have 2 more steps, which would be a total of 3 more progressions on the step lanes, allows the dollars to be retirement eligible. It allows folks more time if they want to get to the masters, because they didn't have the heads up that many folks at the BA town hall said, look, Scott, if you told me this 10 years ago, I would have made other decisions. I would have spent more time earlier in my career going to get it. And not everybody was ready in January to join a George Mason cohort, and I respect that. So this gives 2 more years to either continue to go through the scale or to seek getting to the master scale. I know it's not everything that they want. I'm saying that right up front, and I know it. But I have tried to listen and strike a balance between trying to honor these folks and their contributions to the system and recognizing that we have to have a message. We've had a message around market compensation across our entire organization. It has resonated with our community and our Board of Supervisors to fully fund the budget for the first time in over a decade. And I think we've got to continue to really frame our work around market compensation for our employees. So it is a balance. It's competing. That's why it's tough. I wanted you to understand how I came to this recommendation. When you go back and look at the dollars of all the options, it's somewhere in the middle, right? The $6 million is not the most expensive option. It's not the least expensive option. It's somewhere in the middle. And that was our collective best thinking. And we look forward to engaging the board in questions and any other information that you all need.
Thank you. Before I begin calling on board members who have signaled they want to speak, I do want to share with my colleagues that when Mr. Wilson and I did the pre-meeting, there was some data that we had asked for that we don't have yet. And I understand maybe it was going to be not enough time because our pre-meeting was scheduled for Thursday right before the board meeting, and today's Monday. But I will just tell all of you that there is no way that I feel I can make an informed decision without that information. And in particular, we specifically asked to get the Bachelor Lane scales for Loudoun County, not averaged up with anybody else, just what is the Loudoun County Bachelor Teacher Scales? And then what is the Prince William? There are 2 largest jurisdictions right next to us, and what's been shared with me by our teachers in the county is that they go far higher than we do, and I do have very serious concerns that we will lose existing teachers and we will lose future teachers who will choose to go to those jurisdictions as a result of the actions we take. So the second thing we asked for was, in order for our employees who are currently bachelor teachers, and especially if they're pre-step 15, and even for those who are step 15 and above, we have yet to see a chart that says this is how many courses you're going to have to take. This is what, if you're working full-time for Fairfax County Schools, being the energetic, passionate, prepared teacher we want you to be in the classroom. How many years is it going to take you to earn that master's degree? How many dollars is it going to cost you? And none of that's here for us. And that is essential for making a decision. And finally, Dr. Brabrand, as someone who's married to a corporate individual who does HR and is the general counsel, we've not even had the business side conversation of, if we are gearing toward moving 100% of our teachers toward master's degrees and master's degree compensation, we are talking salary impact, we are talking VRS and pension payment impact, because right now when 25% of your teachers are bachelors and 75% are masters and above, that's a difference for even our salary, annual salary costs and annual benefits and pension costs. And I've not seen any of that type of analysis, and that is a major budget challenge that we will have if we move everybody to 100% masters. And then finally, to Mr. Wilson's point earlier, where is the research that's saying that, you know, at least for our existing teachers who got hired under the belief that they had a step to 23 in this school system, that they're going to be a better teacher going through these described programs that George Mason or others may hold. I think, Dr. Brabrand, you promised us you were going to be someone who comes in, makes quick decisions so we don't agonize as a system, and there's a lot of benefit to that. But I want to let you know that I actually think you've looked at a set of information that staff has provided you, but I don't think staff has provided this board or you all of the comprehensive information that's going to have a fiscal impact and an instructional impact on our system. So, all right, board members, I just needed to let you know there's information here that I appreciate we'll get at some point, but it's not here today.
Sorry, let me add, I know there was the request for the scales, and we were on a time crunch, so I can certainly get that out. We have that information to share.
And again, we need the data on what is the cost to actually earn a master's degree. How long is it going to take, and at what cost is it going to be?
Have it.
What's that?
I have it.
I'm glad you have it, but when we talked to Mr. Drager, we wanted to have it so that we could actually, people can look at it and study it. And I realized we had our pre-meeting very late, so it's not here, and I do think we're going to need it.
And we can get that for you. Listen, this is just like the same conversation from earlier in the day today. I want to work with you all through tough problems. This is not an easy one. Honestly, I wasn't here when the decision was made to do a market-based study. When you do a market study, some people are going to be found to be under the market, and some are going to be found to be over the market. And what do you do when people are found to be over the market? That's one of the questions that we have to decide as an organization. We're going to do let me just finish. We're doing U.S. scales. There are going to be some people who will be over on the U.S. scale, some that will be under. So we want to give you the information to make the best decision. It's not an easy decision, and I respect you all as a board that it is a very difficult position with multiple factors to look at, and we'll work together and come up with what you think is best. I've given you my best thinking about what to do and the rationale, and that's what I promised folks that I would do when I came here. So.
And thank you for setting the tone, because I don't want staff up here to think anything otherwise. We want to be partnering. Just because I'm asking for data doesn't mean I don't think that people aren't partnering.
Right.
I'm very appreciative.
We'll get the data before you have to make. If it's, hey, can't make a decision tonight without the data, no problem. We can bring it, before Thursday or when any other date you'd want to do it.
Thank you. All right. So moving forward, I have 4 board members who have signaled to me that they want to speak. Now I have 5. So in order, I have Ryan McElveen, followed by Elizabeth Schultz, Janie Strauss, Karen Corbett Sanders, Dahlia Palchuk.
Thank you. Can we go back to the slide, I think it was 2 or 3, that talked about the GMU program? Yeah, next. Yeah. So I'm not exactly sure how we got to the $125K mark for funding the tuition reimbursement. But it seems to me that if we offered this as an option to teachers for them to get a master's and advance themselves, that we would have allocated enough money to satisfy all those who had applied to do so. So this is very concerning to me. And I would one question initially I have on this is this indicates that they applied in the spring semester, or they began their coursework in the spring semester?
They began their coursework.
Okay, so these people essentially have lost out on that opportunity. So that's disappointing. We're looking at about, 55 people. And I see moving forward we have funding for 130. Do we have a sense of the interest? You've said there are 38 interested, but clearly 55 applied and were not accepted last time. So I don't see how those numbers jive. Can someone explain that?
I'm not sure the 55 that you're referring to.
So
Are you referring to the tuition reimbursement?
Correct. You had 186 of 241.
Yes, so we had a prioritized list of teachers who would be eligible for tuition reimbursement, and so we used that prioritized list to fund those tuition reimbursements.
Sure. And so does that indicate, as Ms. Schultz suggested, that those 55 applied for reimbursement, did not get reimbursement, but are still pursuing the degree?
What we know is that they were not able to receive the tuition reimbursement. We can make an assumption that they continue their coursework and may apply for tuition reimbursement next semester.
Kathleen, it might help. I think correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. McElveen, he's making a distinction between interest in the cohort programs that we did for the masters versus just the general tuition reimbursement that we had. Maybe if you could talk a little bit more, a little more context about that.
So anyone who was interested in the GMU cohorts and was accepted into the program through the application process was eligible and did receive the 50-50 tuition share for the cohort program.
This graph is extremely confusing. So this is describing two separate programs. This has a cohort, and then you're saying tuition reimbursement is separate from the I am.
So we broke it down by semester. So if you look at it on the first row where it says spring 2018, you will see two columns that include information about the GMU cohorts and one column that includes information about tuition reimbursement for spring semester. And then we move down to the second row, which is the fall semester.
What I don't get is how this chart is made, because ostensibly in that first column, you would have the total number of people admitted to the cohort, right? And then tuition reimbursement would be a subset of that.
They're two separate programs. So the GMU cohorts.
We need a completely new chart.
Okay. So, Mr. McElveen, let me see if I'm hearing this correctly. The 44 who got admitted to the program, they were the priority and they got their reimbursement. If you go all the way to the far right, 241 teachers have said, I'm going to enter into a master's program. 186 of them, we said we can give you reimbursement, the 50-50, correct?
Correct.
And that includes the 44 that are in the
No,
special.
the 44, it's a 50-50 tuition sharing arrangement. So teachers pay 50% of the tuition. FCPS pays the other 50%. The tuition reimbursement is completely different.
Okay, so what happens with the 186 who did get their request approved? How much are we paying them?
So it's approximately $700 per course.
So it's not a 50-50 reimbursement.
It is not 50-50
Right.
for the tuition reimbursement,
right.
but the other thing I would say is that tuition varies from university to university.
And I just want to remind the board that when we created these options for cohort and tuition reimbursement, we realized that we had some teachers who might already be in a program and wouldn't want to start a GMU program. So we wanted to provide options for those teachers who are already pursuing coursework so that we could fund their current coursework and then provide an option for those teachers who wanted to do the 50-50 split. So we have two separate programs, and we're funding both approaches because we wanted to provide teachers flexibility.
So, but the issue is going to be that you're saying in the far right column of the 186 people, they'll get $700 per class that they take. And this was part of the data information that I asked for. Even if you looked at George Mason, what is George Mason charging for a single master's course?
So what I can share with you is the charge for the GMU cohort. So we had an agreement with Mason. For the average cost with one course per semester is $703 for the employee, and the same $703 for FCPS. So it's $1,400 per course.
But that's only if you're in the cohort. Can you be getting a master's if you're not one of those 44 people at George Mason?
Yes, you can still do that and seek tuition reimbursement.
And would they be charging them $1,400 for a master's course? Or is it, again, that's the discounted rate only in the cohort?
So we receive a discounted rate regardless for our FCPS employees. And Annie, do you have that figure by any chance about how much you would pay as a teacher if you were not part of the cohort?
So the advertised GMU full tuition rate is $595 per credit hour, and
So
we receive
$1,800 then for a 3-credit class.
approximately, yes.
Okay.
And we get a 25% discount on that. GMU has other programs. So, for instance, those who are participating in a tuition reimbursement program, they potentially are receiving a 15% discount, which is the discount that GMU offers to all FCPS teachers taking coursework through the College of Education and Human Development.
Okay, so if you're not in that group of 44, then your discounted rate is going to probably be 15% off of $1,800 per class.
Correct.
Okay. Mr. McElveen, those are really important questions. Do you want to keep going?
Yeah, I still don't understand how to read this. So I think what we need is, since this is 2 separate programs, it should have been presented in 2 separate charts, because the way it's presented is unreadable. So I'd be grateful if you could come back to us with 2 different charts, tell us what we would need to fund to accommodate all of the teachers that want to pursue both of these options, because the way this was handled was not appropriate and unfair to teachers.
Mr. McElveen, not to put you on the spot, because you've asked great questions, but in terms of the other part of this presentation, which Dr. Brabrand's recommending that including this current year, we would be giving up to 3 years step to those who were in the existing step 19 to 23 range. And that does, of course, leave some people who were at step 19 short by a year. And then everyone who's step 18 and below, it's going to be nothing. So do you have anything you want to weigh on that?
My initial concern is that this was handled inappropriately to begin with. So I think we need to start with fixing this as a base before we move on to the other piece.
Oh, thank you. That's helpful. So just to make sure I understood where your feeling is, you need more accurate information to digest, analyze this before you could even arrive at a recommendation to the superintendent. Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. So Ms. Schultz, you're next, followed by Ms. Strauss.
Okay, so what I recall, and I'm going to harken back, I'm going to try to tie threads of commonality for the day. This is the difference between presenting information in a way that is meaningful, that helps us make decisions, versus us stumbling. And so earlier, the ease of information allowed us to have I think it was more facile to understand, and therefore helped us navigate the conversation a little better. If I recall, we allocated $250,000 for tuition for the year. But because they were starting in the spring, that's why the $124,419, which is basically half of $250,000. Then the $250,000 plus the amount for the success of, so the fall 2018 goes into the spring of 2019. So you're starting a whole new, tuition year. So this is unnecessarily complex here, considering how many times we've discussed this. The bottom line is that we have 44 who went into the program. Were there more who wanted to go into the program than the 44?
No.
No. So the 44 took the whole amount. Then other people who were currently underway, either currently underway or were interested in starting, but didn't want to do, because there was a limited cohort focus here. So that wasn't something they were interested in at all. So they said, just give me the money and I'll go do it my dang self. So that's the 241. Apparently the 124,419 wasn't enough to go for the 241 at 700 a pop. So it's only 186. Then there's the flow over. Part of the concern I have is you said that there's 130 spots available starting in the fall, but there's only 38 who are interested, and there's only 12 who've actually applied.
Correct.
That's a huge gap. And what I posit, and I'm not saying that this is the answer, but my takeaway is the degree of frustration around all of this has deadened the interest. Otherwise, we'd be at 120 applications out of 130 spots. And so this is I think I was probably one of the very first to say, I don't like it. I don't like how this is handled. there is a difference between, for me, bringing a teacher in and saying, these are your salary lanes, this is your professional path, and this is your tuition reimbursement, and should at some point in the future you decide to get a master's, you'll get a bump in pay. And then they make their plans and they have families and send children off to college themselves, et cetera, et cetera. To come in at the back end and say, oh, by the way, I know we cut off our tuition reimbursement, but you didn't go get that salary bump because you didn't get your master's, and now we're going to freeze you out, is a whole different kettle of fish. That, for me, is pulling the rug out from underneath people who we've set up a relationship with as our new employees, as our mid-career employees, and now our seasoned employees. And these are the very same employees as I meet with employees out in the community who come to my town halls, who come to my community office hours, who say, the teacher in the classroom next to me has a master's. Their curriculum is no different. Their student load is no different. The number of tests that they give is no different. And frankly, I'm mentoring the new teachers that are coming in. So where is the differentiation in the workload that is demanded of me? They're being paid more. They have a degree. But the practicum, the on-ground practicum of the way in which we perform our jobs is no different. Now, if they are being held to a higher standard in student achievement, what is the pay differential for? Is it purely for education, or is it for the relationship that they're developing with their students and their student achievement? There isn't a difference in the workload. And those same teachers are now mentoring young teachers, student teachers coming in, and providing, and participating in professional development in the same way. So I'm being asked to differentiate on, can we go to scale 9, or slide 9, I'm sorry. So I'm being asked to differentiate here, what's the best choice? And it's like, what size billy club do I feed them with? I mean, really, it's difficult. And I'm not saying this is not on you. This did not come from you. But the reality is that you got the grand poobah hat. So I don't envy you this situation. But my problem is that I'm being asked, okay, pick 6.3. And then what? They top out in 2021, and we're right back in the thick of it again. So half this board is going to absolve themselves because they won't be running again. And I'm like, okay, so they're not going to have to deal with it. And for anybody who's left, you got to pick up the bag of what that we're throwing to you in the future in 3 years, and you're going to have to deal with it all over again. This is choosing from bad to worse. So, Ms. McLaughlin, if you're looking for a decision from me at this point, I'm a little bit like Mr. McElveen. I don't have quantified here how many are in each, unless we go back to that. Can we go back? Was it slide 2 maybe that we skimmed over pretty quickly? That one. So how many of those, because we don't, so the purple total, no. So the column to the left of the purple from 21 down, from step 21 down, is that who we're calculating, or is it just the people in the white square?
In the white square. So currently step 19 and down on those BA lanes. The
4,100, approximately 4,100 teachers in our system.
No. I mean, what's the total of just the square in white? Is that the 183, 97, and 33?
No, that's the 419 captured
The
in the box up
419
here.
for step 19 to 23, grandfathered, that we were talking about grandfathering. If you only grandfathered the 19 to 23 who were affected by this proposal.
But that's 419 right now, right?
Yeah, 417 right now. And then, but overall in the system, if you go bachelor year 1 to bachelor 18, you're going to end up with the 4,100 total.
I want to make different priority choices someplace else and retain my most seasoned employees, because if I message to the rest of my employees that I will treat my most seasoned employees, who are in fact acting as the mentors to the younger employees and employees who are coming in, working on their masters, when I have a national teacher shortage, how do I draw successive generations of teachers? So I'd rather look someplace else and keep and honor the respect of maintaining the teachers that we do have in these seasoned positions.
So to my colleagues, one thing that when we had our pre-meeting, we talked about options. Staff and Dr. Braeburn are obviously concerned about what do we communicate out to our bachelor teachers in this white square right now, the 417. So a couple things to think about as you're going to be giving your remarks is, one, we could say, Dr. Braeburn, thank you for your first step on this. We do like the idea of making whole those people who are in this box right now. And so you're offering to do, 3 steps, including this year, which if you're at step 20, right now this year, then if you're getting 3 more steps, you could.
I understand what you're saying, Ms. McLaughlin, but what I'm saying is I am a perennial advocate of working ahead of a problem, not cleaning up at the back of the parade of a problem. And so what I would rather do is message to employees 3 to 4 years out that if you don't have your master's by then, you're going to fall in the white square. But what I don't want to do is catch in a snare by surprise those already in the white square and saying, you're done. You're cut off. I'd rather say we've got a plan that whatever total number of employees are going to be caught by this, and it may be 2 or 3 years out, that we quantify and stem the bleed at some point and establish on a going forward basis that at this point in the future, that we send up the flag now, at this point in the future, if you have not obtained your master's, this is the white square you will find yourself in. I do not and cannot support a situation that says after the fact, we're going to pull the rug out from underneath you, even though we messaged to you your entire career that this is where you would be. Because if you take a seasoned teacher who is at, what did we say, what step? 19?
Step 18.
19?
Mm-hmm.
How many years has that teacher been out of college?
Well, potentially up to 19 years.
19 years.
Yeah.
How old are children that we send to college? 17, 18, 19 years. They're sending their own. Are we asking our most seasoned employees to make a decision between sending themselves to college or sending their own children to college?
Schultz,
I can't do it.
I completely understand every point you've made. I do want to make the board aware, while she was talking earlier, I sent you the chart of the Prince William County Teacher Scale. It was the thing I asked for last Thursday. I hope you will open it, because what you will see is Prince William County goes up to step 28 for their bachelor's teachers, and you can make up to $117,000 to $119,000 by your year-end career. We've got a proposal that came from our consultants that said, Fairfax County, stop your bachelor teachers' pay at about, what was it, $79 or $79,000, $80,000.
Still total compensation. It's still
I understand
the problem that catches us is total compensation.
Yes, but Ms. Schultz, even when you give all the total compensation, Prince William, I'm just giving you what their salary is, and even if you go salary to salary, $80,000 is a very different thing than looking at $120,000. A very different number. And
so as I've always arrived each budget cycle up until now where I've been willing to put amendments on the table and say we've got to make some different and difficult, hard priority choices. For me, the difference between 6.3 million, which is what Dr. Braybrand is offering, can you go to the slide number 9, 6.3 million and 10.4 is 4.1. I'm saying either he finds it or we find it. Correct? 10.4 is the most expensive option, which is no bonus and step for 3 additional years.
Well, and that the problem with that chart, Dr. Braybrand, is we have some people who are at step 22. They were only going to get a step for 1 more year. And so we should have said up to 3 additional years, because otherwise, if you're at step 22 and we're saying 3 more years, they might think they're going to get up to step 25. I mean, our language needs to be a little more clear there.
It was honoring steps on the FY17 scale as it had last been published.
I understand, but yeah, I mean, somebody could read that and go, hey, I'm at step 22 and I'm going to get 3 additional years on a step.
Well, and we'd be very clear that you would just fulfill the remainder of your step progression as you would have before we implemented the new scales.
So what is the cost differential between what Dr. Braybrand is proposing in the 6.3, and I don't know where you're getting it, but the 6.3, well, it's the same thing, but that's
3 total versus 3 additional.
Correct.
If you're step 19 right now, you could end up getting step 20, 21, and 22 for 3 additional more years.
But is the
on that one you'd only get
but
step
is the
22.
3 additional also in concert with what you just said, which is it's 3 additional, but capping out at wherever you were previously.
Correct.
So that's what I'm saying. So I'm back to, in order to maximize the choice that's on the table, I think that either we direct Dr. Braybrand or we ourselves pony up and find the way to prioritize. I mean, either the employees are our priority or they're not. And to me,
so again, with that, you can see the cost for FY19 would be the $2.1 million. The 10.4 for option E, that's the total cost.
so what would we have to come up with this year?
For FY19?
An additional 2.1. Good. Then we find 2.1.
No. Sorry. It's capturing some recurring costs there. So it's another.
yes.
It's another $1 million for each step.
Oh my word. Okay, I'm with Mr. McElveen. Seriously, I'm having a difficult time absorbing this. What would it take? How much additional money would need to be found for this budget cycle to do option E?
At FY19.
Ms. Schultz, for FY19, as part of mid-year, we set aside $1.1 million for an option for the BA lanes, but it had assumed that it was a bonus, so it was a one-time cost. So technically, we already have money to fulfill another step for FY19 should the board choose to do that. What would happen is when we get to FY20, we would have to add the recurring cost of a step because we only set aside one-time money in FY18.
How much is the recurring for that 417? And then you're going to have to add another 90 or whatever.
So we didn't cost for the additional 90. This is still just for the 419 teachers.
Ms. McLaughlin?
Yes.
I just wanted to alert you. I'm going to have to leave in 10 minutes to give. I'm speaking to a class tonight, so
Okay,
I'm sorry, but I am going to have to leave. So I just
No,
want
Ms. Evans, I appreciate that, and I know our colleagues are always so generous to accommodate. So why don't you just go next, and then I'll continue with the rest of the queue.
Ms. Schultz, are you finished? Or
I still don't feel like I got the answer to my answer.
Okay,
we'll wind up at the end with next
Elizabeth,
steps.
this might help. All these options are the white box teachers.
So you're saying we don't have to make any decision now at all?
Well, we've got a placeholder. No, right. We have a placeholder that would have been a bonus. That can be your step, and then you wait next year to figure out which of these additional options you're going to do.
I'm not. Okay, if the throwdown is, are you interested in a bonus? I'm not interested in a bonus because that's robbing their future, so I'm not going to do that. I would be interested in applying it as a step.
That's okay. I think the bigger question is going to be, we have some people who are at step 18 right now. What happens to them next
Right.
year? And that's the
Right.
conversation.
And Susan, when she was here, we didn't. I don't believe we fully costed it out. She was doing wild estimates. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. To keep moving to grandfather everybody through was $70 million. Rough numbers to take everyone and just keep. Wherever you are, you're going to go all the way up the scale until, if you're a new employee.
And I can't cotton that either, because that never stems the bleed. But I do think that we could effectively throw down a marker now that gets us ahead of it, that says, okay, for whatever reason we have 20 years of cumulative education policy and financial policy issues, and the bills come due. And it wasn't done before, and it's come due. But what I want to do is throw the marker on a future point in time, not draw it and catch people up in the snare now.
Right.
So if we want to throw that marker out, I'm willing to do it, but I'm willing to do it at a future point in time, not cut people off. And I want to give Sandy her time, so can we please let her speak before she has to leave?
Let me just, the 10 seconds to say, we've set aside money for the bonus that could be the step for next year. But in doing the budget for FY20, we'll have to come up with that reoccurring cost and how long do you keep running it. I propose running it this year and 2 more times. How long do you go? That's part of where I think the discussion goes. Do you go all the way? Do you go to a fixed date and time? That's part of the discussion.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Brabrand. Ms. Evans, and then it will be Ms. Strauss and Ms. Corbett-Sanders.
Well, thank you for your indulgence. I really appreciate that. Usually I'm perfectly happy to stay here until all hours. But right now I wanted to make sure I understand if when we're on slide 4, I'm not sure what we're looking at there. Could you explain to me what the different colors mean? What are we looking at?
So the colors are carried over from when the investment for the fiscal year was made in the teacher scale. And so you see it ties back over to the chart on
that's the percentage of
upper left of the increase they saw for FY18.
I see. Through that investment, not through STEP, not through that. Okay, good. That's actually what I was looking for, because I do think that, the board should remember that we approved the new scales. We did. But I do think that most of us were taken by surprise. I'm not sure why we were taken by surprise, but we were taken by surprise when we realized where we had cut off the BA lanes. We shouldn't have been, I guess. We should have looked at this more thoroughly. So I think now I agree that I do want to do something more for our veteran employees and treat them fairly. We have, you can see from that chart now that I understand what it is, that we have significant increases, and that was by intention. And again, we need to remember that we did this by intention to start our salaries higher and to accelerate higher and to provide that investment at the mid-career range. We did that by intention. What we didn't, I believe, as a board do intentionally was have this impact on the top of the BA lanes. And we're really, tell me if I'm wrong, but we're primarily talking about BA and BA plus 15, correct? Isn't that
no,
the
and
biggest?
BA plus 30. Yeah.
And BA plus 30 as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're correct too about the investment. It was to address that sag in the scale that we had
Right.
previously looked at.
And so we are putting another $53 million into continuing that investment, assuming that right. We did the one, and then we're going to do another. So we have decided to do that. So what I need to do before I decide what my own advocacy is to look at this and see who really was most heavily affected. We can see it somewhat there. And we do at some point have to cut off. I don't think that we can grandfather, spend $70 million to grandfather as well as do the investment. We could do either or perhaps, but we can't do both. So what I need to figure out, you look puzzled, Ms. McLaughlin.
You mentioned $70 million.
Well,
you think it's going to cost us
Dr.
$70
Brabrand
million?
talked about.
If everybody on those BA, everybody, all the way down
Everybody,
BA,
we're
all the way down
grandfathered
BA 15, BA 30.
If
It's
everyone-
never shortened. You're here, you're in the system, you're going to run on the old scale till it's all said and done. You run all those numbers 20 years out, you're going to get a large number.
If we
I don't know
start
if
with-
it's 70,
Okay,
that was Susan.
but let's say hypothetically taking you, and this is where I said to staff, you haven't given us adequate information, but no, Mr. Moon, excuse me for a second. He just said $70 million over 20 years. So that's about doing the math. It's 70 million sounds like a scary number. Now divided out by 20 years. And when we're dealing with large,
It's a couple of,
it's a couple $1 million a year. That's,
Right.
let's
Mrs.
not
McLaughlin,
scare people with.
I'm not scaring, honestly, if you go back to the next chart over, if you go over the next chart, keep going, right there. This is that box of teachers. Well, just think about if you started all the way back at BA, right? And we can run those numbers. We can show those numbers, and then you think about that year after year. It's just
Okay.
it adds up over.
So,
20
All right, so
years.
anyway, I think
Ms. Evans, you continue. I apologize. You wanted to know why I was
that's all right.
puzzled.
I mean,
and-
I just wanted to make those points and say that we do need to do something more for our veteran teachers at this point. I do want to cross-reference what we're doing with the investment and see where we need to go back and make sure we're not treating people unfairly. And I do apologize for having to leave early.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. I now have Ms. Strauss, followed by Ms. Corbett-Sanders, and then Ms. Palchuk.
Okay. First of all, whatever we do, we know that our employees appreciate a step more than a bonus because a step goes towards retirement benefits. So I think that's important. Montgomery County goes to BA plus 20. They cut off at 20. And I know that has been a discussion point for many years. Should we go with Montgomery County and encourage people to get a master's degree? I do believe that we should continue to compensate people at a higher level if they go ahead and get more advanced degrees. We are an education institution. So I cannot figure out Arlington counties. When you look at their scales, they do it by every single job classification down to the food service. So you guys, I don't think that they go to a BA plus 30 because I know that that is also seen as part of the market study, but I don't know when they cut it off. Prince William cuts it off at BA plus 28. My concern over time is that if we, I think that sort of the short term is we already, out of the FY 2018 budget, as Ms. Evans indicated, we've already set aside $1.1 million, so that's there. If we do the option E for FY 2019 for those employees who are already towards the top of their scale, we have to find another $1 million. I think the long-term issue that the board has to decide, do we restrict the BA lanes at all, or do we continue with the BA plus 30 or plus 40 or plus 50, which will give you pretty much over market if we still believe that is there a competitiveness in the market to continue to pay or have constructed a different salary scale for a master's 15 plus 30 or PhD. And we do have different scales for administration. We do have state requirements for certifications, and it is expensive to get the certifications, and we hold our teachers to it.
Annie, did you say $1 million for 2019?
No, it is one more. We've already set aside $1.1 million. We set aside at mid-year. It's already there. If we decide to go with adding 3 more steps to the people in that white box, which is, in other words, is the people, potentially into those more senior levels, it will cost us $2.1 million. We've already got $1.1 million set aside. Well, that's what we need to know for sure. Is it an additional 2.1 or is it an additional million? Maybe Alice can help us with that. I think it's $1 million.
It's
What?
$1 million.
It's $1 million.
Yes. For
Yes,
19.
for 19.
So what this chart is showing is that in FY18, there was a step cost of $1.1 million. So that recurring piece plus another $1 million should you choose to add another step for these 419 people, your total base would increase by $2.1 million.
But the 1.1 was one time because it was bonus.
No, it was a step. It was approved as a step as part of the year-end final budget review.
We've set aside, yes.
So
That
you used, okay, maybe I should step back. At the FY17 year-end budget review, the board approved a step. We used one-time money for that step, but when we built our FY19 budget, you'll see that we had to add the recurring cost of that step to the FY19 base. So that is detailed and delineated in our 19 budget.
Right. And I guess it's my understanding of reading this. We already, because we set aside at mid-year.
Yes, that also was one time.
That's right. It's one time. So that for 2019, do we have to find an additional 2.1 million or an additional million?
No, you've already set aside $1.1 million, but it was set aside as a bonus. You can use that to fund the step.
Right.
It's just that when we go to FY 2020, the same thing will happen. Because it's a recurring cost, it'll increase our base in 2020 by that $1.1 million.
Right. So.
Yes.
Right. Yes. And
yes.
Which is fine because it becomes a reoccurring cost.
Yes.
So, as I say, I cannot figure out what Arlington County's BA scale, but I believe that they do not go to a BA plus 30, I think.
They do not.
They do not, because that, when we did the competitive market scale, I believe the consultants took all of those things into consideration, and as I say, Montgomery County cuts off at 20, and I know we've looked at that one for a very long time. I would like to make sure that I understand the Arlington. I can't figure it out. You guys are smarter than I am. They are so granular.
Yeah, no, they don't have the bachelor's plus 30 pay lane. There was, I think, a handful of districts that did not in the study.
Right.
For Maryland, they do, after 10 years, you're required to obtain a master's degree.
That's right.
Or actually, you cannot continue employment as a teacher.
Right,
in the
exactly.
state.
Montgomery County. And usually when we've done market studies, we look at Montgomery County and Arlington County as our major competitors locally. So I think we need to make sure that we understand what that is. But anyway, for my advocacy, I clearly, whatever we do, it has to be in a step because that's what is valued. I want to continue to increase. I want to continue to recognize a master's 15 plus 30 and all of that. I am not comfortable continuing on forever a BA scale that goes to 30. I think that gets us too far above market. So that's where I am. So
okay, I do want to first remind everyone that when we were here in November, many of us asked Dr. Brabrand and staff to say the grandfathering wasn't magically at 19. For some of us, we felt like changing the rules of a game of a teacher who was somewhere between years 15 and 18. We may want to grandfather not to year one because, we've looked at those numbers. But when you're talking about a teacher who is 15 years into our system, so they're 3 years outside of being grandfathered in, but they're very far in their careers that going to get a bachelor or getting their master's degree might not have a return on investment of how much time and money it costs them to earn it. And so that, Dr. Brabrand, is just another reminder. This didn't come in your recommendation, but it was something we asked for, and it's what's giving me a lot of heartburn because Ms. Strauss, when we talk about who we're getting grandfathered in, I think there's going to be, understandably, a lot of teachers who are 15 plus years into their career and wondering what happened here.
Mrs. McLaughlin,
yes.
I know you are the meeting manager,
yes.
but there are many of us on the list patiently waiting for their turns.
Yes.
I mean, if you put your name on the list and then wait for your turn to speak, it's almost 7 o'clock.
Yes, Mr. Moon.
Okay, I understand that we're probably not going to finish.
You're
this tonight.
100% correct, Mr. Moon. So, Ms. Strauss, you may finish, and then we have Ms. Corbett-Sanders.
I would encourage us now to go through the list, and then you can share. I think we understand where you are, Ms. McLaughlin, thankfully, but I think we need to listen to everybody else now. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of comments. When this first came to the board, there were a number of us who expressed concerns and actually asked quite specifically how people felt about, being frozen at the level. And this goes back to when this was first presented well over a year ago. And at that point, we were told that there was full support, that people were comfortable with it, and that we should stick to focusing on the pension funds. So now we're back here again, and it's quite unfortunate we're still here having the same conversation. So I think from a lessons learned going forward, probably we should look at gaming out things and modeling things before we make decisions. But we are where we are, and so I have a number of questions. One is more of a philosophical question about how we define a market for teachers. Because is the market for teachers the credentials they come to us with, or is the market for teachers the impact they make in an individual classroom? And the growth of individual students. And so that's something philosophically I think we do have to address, because it is not necessarily the case that somebody with an advanced degree is achieving the same growth for the students as somebody without an advanced degree. So that is something that, from a philosophical point of view, this board needs to make a strategic decision that says we believe or we don't believe that there is a certain level of educational attainment that is expected from our teachers by a date certain in time, as you referenced, Maryland. Or is it something that, if we talk about the market for teachers, is it that we expect a certain level of performance from teachers? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there that is one of the questions I have on how we define what our market is. That's something that, Dr. Brabrand, as a business person, that's what it's all about, how you define the market. One of the things that we asked a while ago, and I think would be very helpful, is to have a comparison for this group of teachers that are impacted by this, our white space teachers. What was the commitment made to those teachers as they came into the system, and if they had received the steps throughout the progression of their careers, where would they be today? And at the end of their career versus what we're projecting now. And I ask this because it's my understanding that this group of teachers during the Great Recession were frozen for a period of time. And so have we fully compensated and caught them up and moved forward? Because, we talk about which teachers are impacted and where we infused money into the pay scales and when we infused that money. So on page, let's see, I don't have it, page 4, this page here, it would be helpful to overlay on this chart where we infused money into teacher scales, because that can also focus on if we are only going to address a subset of infusion into the BA lanes for continued steps. It would be able to say, who we caught up and who we didn't. But there's another piece, which is we keep talking about 419 employees. But if you look at employee count by lane and steps, and if I look at 21 through 25, plus the 26 plus, I end up with a number of 558, not 419. So is that the longevity, folks?
Oh, in the gray line at the bottom where it says max in that row? The 183, 97, and 33?
Well, if I take 248 plus 128 plus 128, and then I add 54, I get to 558.
No, the 248 there for 21 through 25 for the BA lane includes the white box, or starting at step 20, so starting with the 50, 36, and 29, and then adding in the 183 that are at the max at the bottom.
Oh, the max there.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then we're actually, when we're talking about it, it's the 248 plus 47 plus 25 plus 17. So our numbers don't come to 419.
No, I'm not sure if I'm following. So the 248 is just those in the bachelor's lane that are step 21 through 25. And then, again, we have the BA plus 15 and the BA plus 30 broken out.
Okay, but if you add 248, sir, plus 128, plus 128.
Across, okay.
You add them across, because you're not double counting there, am I correct?
Correct.
Then you add the 54 and the 26 plus. It's not true. They tapped out at 28 in the past.
I think it would be helpful to have that information of the history of when our steps changed.
Sure.
Yeah, we need that historical context to be able to make informed decisions, because to me, our relationship with our teachers, it's a covenant. And so we need to understand what was committed before. And yeah. Okay, so that's my question, because our numbers, and this is a constant confusion to me of, we use one number, but then if we look at another chart, it has a different number, and they don't necessarily mesh up. And so if we could have that clarity, it would be very helpful. And then, so having a comparison. The other thing is whether we have any data on the effectiveness of teachers based on their level of educational attainment. And when we look at the possibility of funding for 2 additional years, so a 3-year of STEP, then what happens to the group right behind it at 18? So we do have to have some sort of informed decision-making here of what we're doing and signaling that to the community. And then additionally, I think it would be very helpful to understand from a demographics of who's impacted.
Can you clarify? Sorry. I mean,
is there a difference in our employee base as to who is impacted, who has bachelor's and who has master's, and whether or not it has any impact on our ability to attract and retain teachers that are either Hispanic or Black or any other minority?
Is that it, Ms. Corbett-Sanders?
So to sum up, we just need more information for informed decision-making. We need to have consistency in our numbers between one chart and the other, and we need to have an understanding of what the impact is and what where we've made commitments and where we've frozen people in the past.
we have a summary we can provide to the board for that, of past years.
Okay, that would be
Steps
great.
and when they were frozen, yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Palchik, I know you're next, but Mr. Wilson needs to leave, so if he can go ahead of you, I think he only has a few quick questions.
With your permission?
You owe me one, Mr. Wilson. Yes, go ahead.
All right, well, I'm going to give everybody a favor and try to be as brief as possible. Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin, for fixing my mic. So I think that I kind of just echo everybody's comments about the information that we need to make a decision as a board. Obviously, coming back and revisiting this after we've made a decision is awkward. So I totally agree with Ms. Schultz that let's make this a one-time fix. Let's get it right. Let's get all the information we need. And I think that, where I start is that if we differentiated treatment of teachers based on their BA, that is the fundamental mistake we made. If we treated them differently, because we had MA teachers who were also above market, did we treat them the same way if they were BA teachers? Because, I think we did have certain portions of our MA scale that were above market. And so I think we needed to treat all the teachers the same. And I think we also need to be very mindful of the teacher shortage, and that, in fact, Prince William and Loudoun County I suspect, are most difficult competitors in terms of keeping those teachers who are in the BA lanes. And if we look at this chart, we were very dependent on our BA Step 1 teachers coming to Fairfax County. I mean, it is essentially half of our new teachers. And I think we've got to be very mindful of signaling to those teachers who we've said, hey, they're the ones we really want, as you've said, to hire them and keep them and then retire them, right? Those are the ones we've got to be sending the message that we want to send about valuing our teachers. And if you look at our Step 1 and 2 teachers, it's really almost dominated by the BA teachers. And so I think that then leads to the question of what are the benefits of telling those young teachers and telling those mid-level teachers and telling those senior teachers that they need to chase another degree. They need to pursue this other degree. I'm a total believer in lifelong learning, but we have to look at it in terms of what is the benefit to our kids that are in the classroom. Because I guarantee you, if you go out on the wall outside and look at Teachers of the Year, they don't all have master's degrees. Most of them got bachelor's degrees. And they did a great job. And I think we just always have to keep our eye on the ball with that. I would like to better understand the history. I would like to understand what would it take to sort of rewind the clock and treat them absolutely the same way as we treated all of the other teachers in our system, not giving them a sort of a less of a deal somehow than our MA teachers. I think I have to understand that before I could make a decision.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Ms. Palchak, followed by Ms. Derenak Kofax and Mr. Moon.
Thank you. And I really appreciate the work. I know when we met, I guess it was in November, we asked for this information. I know you and a quarter of us, I believe, were not here back when this first started being the market study. So we'll get there. I have kind of 3 areas that I have questions. Some are repeated, some are not. One is, would it be possible to get information on how the requests are approved for the priority teachers? Is that something we could see?
You mean for the tuition reimbursement program? Yes, of course.
Okay.
We can share that.
Thank you. That would be helpful. My second question and concern is, I think, aligned to what Ms. Corbett-Sanders was saying, is can we have not just a feeling is great, data, information on why we're, putting masters at such a high level. I know many of us are concerned that we're no longer helping fund board certification, right? And so we haven't included that. So I think at some point we do need to have this bigger conversation of what is it that we know will make the most effective teachers and the ones we want to recruit and retain. So I think it's a little bit hard. We're a little bit pushed for time right now. So if we need to take a step back beyond next year, I'm happy to do that. But I do think we need to have kind of more comprehensive. We are both career changers. There was a lot more support and funding for that at the time, and it included a master's program, I believe, when you did it, when I almost did that program. So kind of where we are now and how we look at the teacher shortage and how we keep the teachers locally. Specifically at the program, I know I took a class with Curry School. Their cost is $350 per hour. This is the UVA Curry School of Education. And while I appreciate that GMU has given us 25% as opposed to 15% discount, I want to get our bang for our buck. I would want to make sure if this is something we value, that we're able to cover, can we get to 80%, and can we lower the cost if we're getting so many teachers through their program? So I don't know if that's something we've looked at, if we can, I guess, get more information, look at future negotiations, or do we create an internal program? Some districts have done that. If we say this is a value, can we internalize it or lower the cost somewhere?
We can get that information.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And then I guess finally, of where we're looking at the scales, I think I agree with several of my colleagues. Definitely the step, not the bonuses. It's a much better investment in our teachers. And we do. I believe we at minimum have to look at what we're doing for 19 and up and for 15 and up. And what can we do for tuition reimbursement? Can we go beyond the 50%? If we are going down that road for teachers who at least 10 years and up, can we increase tuition reimbursement? I mean, I'm a little concerned that we didn't fill the 2 cohorts, right? And it looks like for next year, we're still not filling them. So perhaps reevaluating that program and looking at how we can get, if this is where we're going, how we can get more teachers to be able to and to want to do that. Do you have a thought? Are you just nodding?
No, I have a thought, but I feel like I ought to let everybody talk, and then I'll put my thoughts all in one thought.
And my question to get a better sense of Principal Yemen Loudon, it looks like their proposed scale had gone up to 30 and then they changed it to 28. I don't know if that's correct for this year. Do we have a sense if they're looking at further changes to their teacher scales? Because when I Googled, I found up to 30 was their proposed scale.
Yeah, Loudon is doing an enhancement to their schedule, but they're not adding any steps.
But are they decreasing? It looks like I couldn't tell.
No, they still have 30 steps, but they are looking at a $15 million cut to their budget. So whether they continue with their enhancement as proposed is questionable. The other jurisdictions, Arlington, Alexandria, and Prince William, have not proposed an enhancement to their schedules, only step increases at this point in time, but that could change.
Okay, so currently they're on the same route they were. Okay. Yeah, so I don't know if that means, right, we start to look at how quickly we're moving up the MA scale in order to take care of our teachers who are most experienced and with our kids every day. And then kind of at the long term, you know, with the scale, the number of teachers we're putting through this, is the program, the tuition reimbursement we're looking at, the most effective for professional development, for investments, for what we want, you know, teachers to get out of the program as we move toward Portrait of a Graduate? I guess those are my questions. Are we aligned in the best possible way?
I think I'm going to do my thought. You know what my thought is, honestly, after listening? You want me to wait?
I've got only 2 more because, as Mr. Moon so aptly noted, you've all heard my opinions multiple times tonight. So I have Ms. Dearna Koufax followed by Mr. Moon.
So thank you for this presentation. We appreciate it. I feel that the most important thing we need to start with is a refresher in the history about why we decided to do this. This year we are at a different place in our budget cycle, and it's a much rosier picture than it has been in the past. We have been through several cycles, and when we did this salary evaluation and we looked at where we were above market, but I can't even remember the specificity of at what level, at what step. I think in order to be an effective decision maker, I have to see that. I also have to measure it with surrounding jurisdictions, and I would, in addition to the ones mentioned by my colleagues, we can't leave out Arlington. It may be a much smaller system, but I still think it's a competitor for us. I would like to, as I think Ms. Corbett-Sanders said, just understand the demographics in that cohort, and I'm more of I'm concerned about, and well, I don't even know. For me, it's not a racial breakdown of demographics. It's more like demographics where they are in their career path. Are they career changers? Have they been here? I'm assuming that by the time you reach that step level, how many years approximately do you have invested in the system?
I'm sorry, which step level?
Well, where we're talking about beginning cutting, so that 19 to 22.
I mean, roughly it's a 1-to-1 for years of experience. Now we have some bubbles in there with freezes and so forth that collapse some things, but roughly 1-to-1.
So I think you have to measure that all against, if you talk about, so I talked about the need for us to do this because of where we were and where we saw ourselves, but I don't think we're ready to make a decision. I think that's pretty evident by what you're hearing. I think, again, we need, as I said, a refresher course. But I will offer you a very anecdotal, comment about that. If you're, I am probably in that demographic, and most of us in that demographic have a couple kids in school. We're paying for our kids' tuition. I don't know if we're going to, at any point in time, like maybe when your kids are out, you can get your master's. That's very anecdotal, but that's the kind of demographics I would be interested in. I guess that's sociographics more than demographics, right? Because I think we do need some information back from our teachers as to why they're not taking advantage of this programming, because obviously they're not interested in it, and it's not something. So I think we need to know why, and I don't know if. But what we do have to do, I think, once we have a refresher on the history, once we go back and look at our the analysis of our salary scales, and we know the main reason we did this is when we looked at it. I remember the chart and the graph, and we were way up, above the market level, and we were way below in this cohort, and that's what the Dr. Brabrand's in this budget that's on the table is bringing all of those up. But we are, as some people said, it's very difficult to think that you've been here this long and then all of a sudden you've nowhere to go, and you may be, Ms. Schultz spoke to that, when you said pulling the rug out from under them. That's very difficult. So I don't think this board is ready to make a decision. I think we need historical perspective. If we have to do something this year in the interim, of course it would be a step, not a bonus. And I think we need the analysis of surrounding jurisdictions. I would include Arlington in it. And that's where I am right now.
Thank you, Ms. Kofax. Mr. Moon?
Okay, thank you for your patience, for my rather impatience. Am I the last one, and then we go to Dr. Brabrand?
Yes.
Okay, good. Now you'll get an opportunity to speak. Thank you. All right. That in addition to everything that Mr. Kofax has asked for, and I'm not, it's just like most of us, most of you, that I'm not prepared to make a final any decision tonight. Let me put it that way. That. In addition to everything that Mrs. Delana Kofax has already asked for, I'm going to ask for a few more things. And, Mr. Smith or anybody else sitting on that side could tell me if what I'm asking is not feasible. $70 million figure that Superintendent mentioned. I want to know how that is computed. Just like got that 10 points $1 million, that the way that's been computed. I want to see year by year. If that is with an assumption that all the BA Lane employees will be basically grandfathered. I want to see how that, and also if it's a $70 million, I don't know, how many years it will take to get to the $70 million point. If we have to put additional $70 million to a BA Lane scale investment without putting additional resources on to pay teacher's salary, how that may affect other lanes. Do you follow me? Masters and other lanes. Because money has to come from somewhere. So without putting additional resources, if we put $70 million more, by whether that's year number 10 or year number 7, year number 20, but how that's going to potentially affect the other lanes.
Where does it come from on the other lanes?
It's the other lanes.
Yeah.
If it comes from the other lanes, how that's going to, I just want to see. I just want to be able to see. And also tell us about benefits and drawbacks of having another separate scale for new employees with a bachelor's degree. Grandfathering everybody on the current bachelor's scale for the new teachers with a bachelor's degree only. If we give them that scale, Well, we cut them up at, I think that's at 18. Is that the current scale we adopted last year?
Yeah, the current scale cuts off at 19
Cuts up
for
at
the BA
19, 19 BA. Okay, it just tell us about whether your HR payroll system whether that can be easily done, and what impact that may have on recruiting the future teachers. Now you have a different scale, old bachelor teachers versus new bachelor teachers. So just let us know for me to consider. And then this is for my colleagues. Salary scale, in as much as probably ideally we want to make a long-term commitment to a certain scale, not having to revisit every year. We make budgetary decision every year. And what this board makes this year, 2 years from now, next board may come back and revisit the whole thing. So that can happen. It could be very painful because they have to go through this process, which we have gone through for last couple of years. But as much as possible, I don't want to do this every year either, right? Some of us may be leaving this board because somebody mentioned 6 of us leaving. I don't know whether that's the right number, but some of us will leave and don't have to deal with this. But many of us will remain, have to deal with this. So, and hope that we don't have to go through this every year. So, in as much as possible, if we could make some decisions that will go beyond just next fiscal year. At least go for a few more years for stability so that we don't have to do this every year. That's my request for my board and my colleagues' consideration. So with that, Dr. Superintendent.
So here's what I'd like to do.
Sorry.
Quick go back, Ms. Schultz.
Sure. So if you look, as Dr. Locker said on a sideboard to me, if you look back, Dr. Brabrand, at about maybe the 13, 14, if I could draw a box between 13, 14 down to about 18, or maybe draw a demarcation line, 13, 14, somewhere around there, and draw a small box actually back behind it, you could quantify a discrete number of people that you could say, look, because the fact that Maryland says, when we hire you, you got 10 years. After that, you don't work here if you don't have a master's. They throw down the gauntlet and they say, at this marker point going forward, you better have a master's or you better find a new job. That is what I think. I think you could delimit the pain and stop the bleed, but what I'm proposing or hoping you will consider is that you do it in a box that isn't already existing in that white, but that you do it at some point back where we give and signal, and it may not be fair and it may be mid-year and it's something, whatever, but we can draw that box. I just want to draw it in a different place. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Ms. Schultz. Dr. Brabrand?
Here's what I'd like to offer. I'm reflecting on this too as a leader. I didn't go back and watch the tapes between Karen Garza and you all when you discussed this whole issue of market compensation. I'm sure there had to be some conversation. I did talk to Steve a little bit, what was said, who was said to what was said to these folks. I didn't do it. I was a little busy when I first got here with some other things that were going on. I'd like to give a step next year. We can do it in the budget. We already have the money aside. And you can give me the date. I'm not going to do it in 2 weeks because what I heard today was a fundamental relooking at our professional development plan. I heard relooking at multiple ways to either have a new scale or pick on the existing scale, and I want to do that thoughtfully and at the level of quality that I know this board expects. And these people work hard. They try hard, but there's no way in 2 weeks they're going to whipty-dipty put all that together. And you can hold you can hold me to a deadline by October 1st. I want the final plan long before there's a new board, long before anybody else comes on to decide once and for all what to do. But I think between now and this budget, we add another step. We let folks know they're going to progress. I still encourage, even if you look at our new scales, And I remember I did this myself. Bud Spillane upped the BA entry level from $25,000 to $28,000 in 1994. But now I even look even at the new one. When you're the big money, the 7% for BA goes from step 3 to 9. For the masters, you got to wait one more year to step 4. But then from step 4 all the way to 15, you're getting 7% increases. So masters, Maryland might have this artificial cutoff, but we still have really a salary scale that messages get to the masters. I still think it's important to encourage our employees around, and we'll relook at it through the cohort, through tuition reimbursement, to continue to be a learning organization, to get additional learning and additional dollars for that. That's how most school systems do it around the country. They mark it to the degree. A few others have done other things, but that's a whole nother kettle of fish. So I'd love a step that we could go ahead and put in, let these people go back to work, finish up the quarter strong, knowing that next year they have another step. And by a date that this board determines, you can tell me at the next work session, hey, Dr. Brabrand, by October 1, we want a responsible professional development plan and a final relook once and for all at how we would thread the needle. And then hopefully for this board and boards in the future, it's a resolved matter. That's my best thinking right now at 7:25. And well, I've got to go to Richmond, but that's not even important. It's important. These people's lives matter. My career started around the same time, but I got the bonus. 3 years before, they had Bud's freeze. And Bud didn't want to freeze it. I know he didn't want to freeze it, but it was the time. And I know a step was restored, but it was years later. And I think we need to tell a better nuanced story than what we've told so far during my time here, both to the community, to our teachers, and to this board. And I'm going to need more time to do it than between now and the end of the budget year.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Exactly your point of, we say, and you said, that it's basically 1-to-1. But the problem I have here is that doesn't account for the freezes. And so couldn't you have somebody that's significantly further along in their career that's at 19? Because that doesn't account for the years in which we froze. So you could have somebody that's 22, 23, 25 years. So that matters too, because then you're pushing out how much further it is until they retire.
Right. And let me just say, I'd still get the information that you all have asked, but I would get it on a time frame that I think is more reasonable to bring it to the level that you all want it at and the nuance.
Right. So here's what I'm going to propose as meeting manager. Dr. Brabrand has given a recommendation. What I'd like to do is 2 things. One, see a show of hands, there's 7 of us here, of how many support his proposal that we go ahead and just lock in that, yes, there will be a step next year for our bachelor teachers, that we will then, for this next fiscal year, and then we will, or the next academic year, then we will review our next steps to make sure that whatever information people want by the fall, whether the date certain is going to be October 1, I think there's a little latitude there, but somewhere in the fall that we would come back and have this final discussion. I think what's really important is to make sure we capture what are the next step information people want, because I think there's things we talked about in November that didn't show up here today. So let's just make sure we're all on the same page. So my first question, Mr. Moon, do you have a question before?
On that one.
So so my show of hands, if you're willing to support Dr. Brabrand's proposal on that step for next year.
Could we discuss on that one?
Oh, I thought you were rushing me along to make sure we just voted on that one. So, of course, Mr. Moon, if you'd like to discuss it first.
In as much as I love my superintendent and I would like to support him. And I will probably at the end, I will support him.
Okay.
But to be fair, this is very important decision, Other board colleagues who are not here, give them an opportunity to participate in this decision making. So, rather than making that decision tonight, give that as something for colleagues to think about.
My suggestion, we can return to this to wrap it up on Thursday night. We have another.
Except then, Ms. Strauss, we have the problem for those of us who also, like our colleagues today, have a personal commitment and won't be there Thursday. So if you all just want to put me on record, but I've I mean, that's part of the challenge we have when we have work sessions is we're giving direction to the superintendent, but I will go with whatever the group wants to do. If the vote is like Mr. Moon was suggesting, or you're suggesting that we postpone tonight and we vote on Thursday, but we do have an audience here that was also, I think, hoping to see what we were going to do. So
there are also only 8 of us here at this point. So while I'm prepared, I don't know if we want to try to get more of us in for that vote.
It's a process issue. I understand. Look, there's 8 of us to decide if you want to vote now or
you can make a
put off
decision
till
on the
Thursday.
step for next year tonight and send a message if you wanted to as a board. And then with everybody, you could go over the next steps of the information you want to see in whatever fall presentation we do.
I'm sorry, we don't
just-
delay votes because people aren't here. I've been here all day waiting for this, as have they. I think it's appropriate for us to make a decision tonight. If somebody doesn't like it, they either had the option to be here or stay here or whatever, but this is it. This is when our business is getting done. This is our work session.
Okay. Can we poll the board very quickly with those who are here? For our colleagues who aren't here, we have not voted on the budget completely, but can we poll it once more just so we see where we are? In other words, how many people tonight are comfortable giving the advice to the superintendent to include a step for everyone, including the people on
Everyone affected by this.
That's right.
And I
Could
want to
we
be
see
clear
that?
on that because this is still not an official vote.
This is not.
And
No,
so
this
we
is
still
not.
need to
This
make
is
sure
a
our
sense-
colleagues are on board.
It is the sense of who is here. So could we
direction
see
of the board.
that?
That's right, but Dahlia, thank you. We will end up voting on the budget. People
Yes,
want to change
yes.
it, then they can.
But right.
All
So
right.
could we see a sense of the board tonight?
Sense of the board tonight.
Madam Chair, with that, I will support tonight.
Okay.
Not to
all right.
prolong
With a
this
sense of the
discussion.
board. This is not
Mhm.
okay. Can we see?
All right,
sense
so
of
yes,
the
the
board
sense of the board
to go ahead
with Dr. Brabrand's
to
recommendation.
plan on a step next year for the
And to have a follow-up with the board in the fall on our long-term plan for our bachelor
But
teachers.
if I could comment on just one more thing. I know Dr. Brabrand gave October date. I mean, I feel that the sooner the better. Sooner the better. October discussion is going to go into, it could even go beyond that. And I don't want to delay this much beyond. We've been doing this for a long time. As long as we get the information, we make a decision and move on.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. I think we'll all take that under advisement. And again, our chair and vice chair will work with Dr. Brabrand. When the staff feels that they have the information to bring to the board, we could certainly bring it sooner. Maybe, Mr. Moon, what we're saying is to arrive no later than fall 2018. Okay, great. Can we pull up the next steps? Because I do think that there were a lot of important requests that will hopefully allow us to deliberate more effectively.
Can I just to clarify, when we do the next steps and there's a board member's name next to it, that is just to make sure that the wording is accurate by the person who suggested it. When it actually goes up on board docs, the names are taken off. So, okay, that's the purpose of the names.
Thank you, Ms. Strauss. Okay, so Mr. McElveen, how much would it cost to fund all teachers who want to attend the George Mason Master's Cohort and Tuition Reimbursement Program? Correct?
That's correct. There were also other pieces to that.
that redo the chart?
Redesign of the chart so that it's intelligible.
I think it's fine just to say the chart, to redesign the chart. All right, everybody support of that? Yep, okay. The next one, overlay on chart from page 4 where FCPS infuses money. Has infused. Where FCPS has infused money for continued steps.
Can we clarify the parameters on that?
I'm not sure I understand that, Ms. Corbett-Sanders.
Okay. If you look at the chart, we have the big white space. Then we have different colors. What we don't have there is the historical context of where, which of the steps, which of the employees have had an infusion of funds over the past couple of years or will be infused this year So we need to understand a little bit more of whose issues have been addressed and whose have not. In particular, that coupled with the next one, which is the historical context for the where people have been frozen and when they've been.
Karen, let me ask if I understand that first bullet. Where my head goes is take the folks in white, go all the way back and see where they were frozen, where did they get the bump? Is that what you're saying? What was their step history until they got to that? When there was money added on the BA lanes earlier?
That's the next bullet. But if you look at slide 4, you've got the current employee lane count by lane and step. What would be helpful? Okay. Never mind. The percentage increase does address that for last year. But what it doesn't show is who's getting additional funds this year. And so what I'm trying to see, I thought where we were at was that we had essentially provided increases for everybody in 15 and below thus far. And so the ones that really did not get any bump up over the past couple of years were the white space. Is that correct?
Correct. And this shows the investment to that coloring scale for FY18. Do you want to see it for FY19? Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, I want 19 as well so that we can make informed. And then the next one is what's the historical context of this group of people when they were frozen, when they were... Yeah.
Yep.
You only want to know about step 19 through and up? You don't want to know about anyone who was step 15 to 18 or anything like that?
No, because I think we're addressing that with the previous chart. It's really this unique group of people that kind of got hit at the front end of their career and the back end.
Just to clarify, what we could show probably is take those steps and kind of work backwards of a career progression all the way back to if they had started a continuous career with FCPS at step 1. Is that correct? Okay.
Okay, support for those two?
Yeah, and I guess to clarify, it would be my understanding the people whose pay was frozen back in the first recession in the early 90s would be people on step 28, 27, 26, most likely.
And the other piece too, I mean, when pay was frozen, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, because I wasn't here for all of it, but it was for all for all lanes and steps. It wasn't just bachelor's lanes, right?
Yeah. It was back in 90, 91, 92, 93, and then when money became available, we went back in and restored the steps.
So can I just ask one more?
Same lines. We were going to. Sorry, the chart to the left, which shows the 21 through 26 plus. If somebody can just explain why there's different numbers on that chart versus the current employee count by lane and step. I think it reconciles. So you need to reconcile our...
I think it does reconcile, but you have to subtract out 19 and 20 and add in the max because it's a different basis on the left side than it is on the right side in that white box. See what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, but it's not really clear because if you just add 21 through 25 and go those first three columns, you have 248 plus 128 plus 128. You add them together, and that ends up, and then add the 54, and you end up with 558.
Correct. But on this chart, what's in white goes from step 19. And so you've got to subtract out the 19 and the 20 and then add in the max at the bottom to reconcile with the chart on the left-hand side.
Okay.
Because that's only reflecting 21 through the max on the left-hand side. And the white area is reflecting 19 through 28 and then the max.
It's very confusing.
We'll figure out how to represent it when we have our fall presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, so Ms. Corbett-Sanders, we're clear on your language then, the historical context? Yeah. All right, everybody okay in supporting that information? Okay. the next one is there a correlation between higher level of education and teacher effectiveness?
Okay, I'd like to weigh in on that one. That is a huge national study that we went through merit pay, we got rid of it. I would challenge my colleagues, if you really want to go that deep into whether or not additional education lines up with performance evaluation, that is a whole nother study. I would not, and I will not support that.
And I might add that when we undertook the compensation study, it was really to look at market. Right. And as we look at other schools within our market, they also use the step and lane method. There are some school districts, as Dr. Braybrand shared, who have moved beyond that, but that has been a very deep philosophical discussion that those boards have had. But we did want to align our pay scales to market, and we had that internal discussion of whether or not we should make some changes and adjustments. And because we had gotten some input to think totally out of the box and bring something totally different. But as we thought about going to recruitment fairs and showing a scale that looked very different than other schools in the market, we know that when young teachers are looking for jobs, it's that starting salary and how much am I going to make. And if our scale looks very different, there may be some difficulties in recruiting. At least that's what we were thinking initially. That's why we brought a scale that still held to the step and lane philosophy.
Right, because if you want to go and do something else, it is very involved and it is very difficult, and our employees did not like it when we went to merit pay, because that's more of a private business where your performance evaluation, that's your bonus or your sales history or what have you. But anyway, I would not support trying to go back in and trying to figure out if a different pay situation.
Ms. Palchuk, you signaled. Did you want to say something to that?
And I understand this is probably definitely needs further conversation. I guess I'd be interested to see in retention what our focus is, not just in recruitment of what we're looking for. As I mentioned, a small district. They did a pilot program in Goochland to internally with their doctorates and PhDs to do a program to ensure that their current employees would get the degrees and the certifications they needed, and it increased their retention quite a bit. And so the question is, yes, there's the recruitment part, but also, especially here, and I talked to members from other states who said they're not having the same recruitment and retention issues we are. They're not seeing the same numbers we're seeing here in Northern Virginia. So at this point, it's recruitment, but it's retaining our teachers in so many great surrounding districts around us. So I guess it's a little bit, I don't know if there's a way we can start to look at that and making sure it's not driven by the universities and colleges, but what is, best practice for kids? I guess that's the question.
So along those lines, Ms. Palchuk, I could get rid of the bullet above, but the very last one, what I would suggest is that we change it to say, would this change have an impact on our ability to recruit and retain teachers, including those from underrepresented populations? But it's not only underrepresented populations. And particularly, it's, you're almost setting up a competition for teachers as to whether they invest in buying their first house or getting a master's degree.
So I think that's a much more effective question to be asking. And since I didn't actually speak to the questions I had other than what was missing from the very beginning, I will reiterate where my concern is. In Ms. Koufax, you talked about Arlington. Arlington has 4 high schools. Prince William is one of the largest school districts right next to us, along with Loudoun. Those two who butt up against us and have cost of living that is cheaper than we do. So if they have scales for a bachelor's degree that can go up to $120,000 and you can live in a cheaper area, I am very worried about our teacher recruitment and retention for anyone 15 years and below, because they don't have to stay here and they can actually make their commute shorter. I mean, we got a lot of risk involved. So to that question, how would this change impact our ability to recruit and retain teachers? Dr. Braverman, I would say, I hope the staff understands, I don't want any more muddying around of a market average. Loudoun and Prince William surround us, and you cannot ignore both of those scales that go very high for bachelor teachers. And if you guys aren't running that analysis of and however you want to do that analysis, but the numbers are there. And that is my biggest fear. So, I would say that bullet, as long as everybody understands, we cannot be leaving Loudoun and Prince William not in the analysis. So, Ms. Schultz?
So I appreciate what Ms. Strauss has to say, that this is muddying or potentially, going into a quagmire. But the bottom line is you can't, on the one hand, say we are essentially an educational organization and therefore emphasize higher education for our teachers, and then refuse to look at the data on whether or not demanding advanced degrees for teachers makes any difference for the academic achievement of the students that they're teaching. That's folly to say we don't want to look at the data. If there are studies, and there are, if there are studies which discuss the efficacy of a teacher and where there may be places where a master's does make a difference. And there may be places where it doesn't actually make a lot of a difference. But to decline receiving information is, to me, the equivalent of sticking our head in the sand, and I refuse to be in that latter category. I think we have to be intellectually curious about the impact of something that we're saying is so important that we're going to extraordinary lengths to create something that we've previously canceled, which is tuition reimbursement. So I would say we have to understand this, because that is in and of itself educating ourselves on the efficacy of something that we're proclaiming as so important.
So Ms. Schultz, your advocacy is there are two bullets up there we have not voted for yet. One is the correlation between higher level of education teacher effectiveness. Do you want to just say that it's the study on whether or not the bachelor's versus master's?
I think staff should provide us information on what studies exist about the efficacy and how it makes a difference in terms of student achievement, the requirement for escalating degrees, and at what point does it make a difference. There has to be a reason the entire state of Maryland has done it. So if the data exists, then give it to us, but don't not ask for the data. That's preposterous.
I'm sure we can figure out how to provide that information to the board appropriately.
Okay. So I read off both of those bullets. So can we vote on the first one, which is that staff is going to provide us information about what studies exist regarding the efficacy of teacher higher degrees? People understand it. I want to just be fair. If you're okay with it, then raise your hand if we just want to get something related to the studies. All right, I see enough hands. Okay. And would this change have an impact on our abilities to recruit and train teachers, including those from underrepresented populations? Show of hands. So in other words, I mean, they've got to come back and say to us, is there a downside to us changing and capping off our bachelor's at step 19? Right. I'm kind of reframing it for people. It's basically saying, is there a downside to voting into this change of we eliminate steps beyond 19 for bachelor's? That's essentially what this bullet point is saying. So do we have support for people wanting to have staff at least bring us, what's the impact? Are there any downsides to doing this? Support? All right, well, I don't see all hands, but I do see a majority who are in this room.
Insufficient information and research, then that's good to know.
It doesn't have to be research. I would hope the analysis of surrounding jurisdictions. Where are we now? Under Ms. Palchek's? Okay. Share information on how the requests are approved for tuition reimbursement program. That's pretty straightforward. There we go. Look at options for lowering the cost and possibly creating an internal program.
Yeah, no, I guess the question was analysis on the GMU program, and
you said it was cheaper to go through the Curry School at $350 per credit hour.
Just right. I know
instead of
you did a lot
1,800,
work
it'd be
to get us
1,000.
there. Right, it would be about 1,000. So, are there ways to lower the costs, especially if we increase the?
In other
the
words,
size of the
saying to
program?
George Mason, how come you're charging us $1,800 for a 3-credit class, and UVA Curry School will charge you $1,000 for a 3-credit class?
Right. The internal's a little bit more long term, like as we rethink our PD. I think I would.
The only thing I can say is paying the UVA tuition, even for undergrad, I'm paying, I think, $3,000 a
This
credit
is
hour.
for teachers, K-12 teachers.
Was that?
This is their cost for teachers.
So UVA charges less per credit hour for a teacher versus an undergraduate student. So it's a special discount. And yes, and it's almost half then what George Mason's charging our teachers. Huh.
We'll look at a cost comparison.
Okay.
Thank you. That would be great. All right.
And
Anybody?
maybe, sorry, if we could, I guess, include with that, I don't know if others are interested, can we know the teachers who apply to are receiving reimbursement not through the cohort where they are doing their programs? Do we have that information?
They either are part of the cohorts through GMU or they get tuition reimbursement, but not both.
She was wondering what other master's programs they're doing. Like, is it online? Is it through Virginia Tech, Northern Virginia campus?
So we can
if we could just kind
We
of
can get that.
see where they are. Okay. Can we see it? Can I see a show of hands who supports the tuition reimbursement program information? Yes. And then the other one was looking at the cost, the options for lowering the cost more, and what other master's programs are teachers doing.
So I'm just going to say, I have a problem. I don't want to do the shopping for teachers. Look, teachers can access whatever master's program they want.
Ms. Schultz, just because of the time, I will tell you, she's not asking for shopping. She's saying, since we've got this special cohort program with George Mason, why aren't we as a system saying
I don't
we're going
feel
to
like
provide you?
it's a good use of our staff time to go find what 200 people are accessing.
You can vote against it.
No. Yeah. What? No.
Annie wanted to weigh in.
As a part of the application process for requesting tuition reimbursement, they do indicate what school that they're getting it from, so we have that information readily available. No, ma'am.
That one's easy, as well as just simply going to George Mason, who we have this partnership, to say, is this as competitive as you can offer to our teachers? Okay. Can we show support for that bullet point? Yeah, it does. It says look at options for lowering. Okay, sorry. Sorry. All right.
So
but I think we need
through the tuition reimbursement program.
Yeah. Lowering the cost more for the tuition reimbursement. And we should say George Mason, GMU, because it's specifically to the GMU.
Citizen cohort.
Cohort. GMU cohort. Okay. That's correct, right? All right, show of hands. Okay. And then consider increasing tuition reimbursement for teachers with 10 years or more.
I feel like this is the proposal that Dr. Brabrand's going to go and weigh and get.
Yeah,
right?
this is just.
All right, so we can just eliminate that bullet.
Right,
It's
that's what he's going to do.
Okay. Analyze if tuition reimbursement is the most effective method for teacher professional development certification for moving towards.
Yeah, so this I think also Dr. Brabrand captured in.
Okay, so we'll delete that. Need to compare our steps to Arlington. I would ask that be combined with the one that I asked from the very beginning, that we want to see Arlington, Loudoun, Prince William.
We have all those. We can provide them. Yep.
Do we lose any teachers to Montgomery County? Yeah. Ever? We do? I've never, ever once heard of a teacher.
Okay, what I will say for staff clarity, because we keep getting this, please do not combine them. I want to see each one as a separate scale, because the market scale analysis and market comparison is how we found ourselves in this situation that, you swirl them all together and the color's as clear as mud and you can't see the distinctions between.
Called a combined matrix.
The bottom line is we need to be able to see what the two largest districts
Okay,
are.
we got it.
I know you said
We
you got it, but I did ask for it in a pre-meeting and still didn't. Still
Well,
got
a
something
pre-meeting
different.
was on Thursday and today's
no,
Monday.
but they did provide a chart. They just mixed it all up again. So it's fine, Dr. Braybrand.
I just want to presume positive intentions between the board and staff at every moment in our relationship, please.
course.
That's all.
But there was
no one's
never
here
bad
trying
intentions.
to swirl and make it purposely confusing.
And my comment was not bad intentions.
Okay.
It was just clarity of what I wanted to see.
Okay.
That's all it was. Not bad intentions implied. Provide information. Okay, so we're voting on that one to get teacher salary scales. That bullet, it says our steps. So our BA teacher salary scales. Your BA lanes. There you go, BA lanes. Everybody understands what that is. Raise your hand for those, okay? Provide information about cohort participants, where they are in their careers and why more teachers are not participating. I'm not sure I understand that.
Why do we have 30 participants? I mean, can we, is it easy? Right. I mean,
we have 44 plus another 186.
Right, but it was 246. We only funded 186, but 240 applied.
So that's 287.
Almost 300. It was 44 and 246.
Let's just go ahead and ask for that because I think they have the information, and let's go.
Okay, that's fine. Show how cost of program was calculated, how funds will be used, and drawbacks of having separate scale. I think you meant the
70
cost
million, I
of
think,
this.
right? The 70 million
I think he
of
just
keeping
means
all the
the
BA steps.
It wasn't the cost of the program, it's the cost of this BA lane change. How the cost of the BA lane change was calculated.
If we grandfather,
Can you put it, okay.
if
So
we
now-
grandfathered everyone on BA lane, how the $70 million that ultimate cost has been calculated? Just show us year by,
Exactly where we would have to take the
how
those
the
dollars
$70
from.
million.
Why does it cost $70 million?
Over 20 years roughly, if we were to grandfather everybody from.
Just to show how the $70 million for keeping all current bachelor lane employees grandfathered been calculated.
Okay.
And also show us advantages and drawbacks of having a separate lane for the new bachelor teacher employees.
For the newly hired fall 2018 and beyond. So it's basically, which is something we've done in the past.
With the retirement pension.
Yep, with our retirement pension. Okay. Do people want to speak to this bullet or they need to add a bullet?
No, quick question.
Okay.
When we get the history, will that include, at some point, was our BA plus 30 combined with our MA? Was that one lane, or am I mistaken?
It's 2 lanes.
Sorry, historically or the future?
Historically.
We can check. I'm not
Okay,
sure.
that
It
would
might have
be
been.
helpful.
I think that was an addition at some point.
Okay.
Okay, there's an additional cost number that's not here. Well, 2 of them. One is, what is the cost and time for the teachers if they're going to pursue this master's degree?
Right, what's their out-of-pocket expense?
What's their total cost and how long will it take them if they're going to have a course, one class a semester? How many courses are you talking that you have to take and the time it will take them to achieve it?
So we'll have to know, the cohort will be different than all the other different programs, correct?
Well, I think when we talked about the pre-meeting, it was just an estimate of it takes typically 12 classes to get your master's degree. If you take one per semester, you're talking at least 6 years, or if they take some courses over the summer. But there is a cost factor, and we have heard from our teachers that depending on where you are in your career, you will lose money if you actually go pursue the master's only to try and get any more steps.
So again, I have a clarification. Is the cost after those teachers then get their master's and get the master's bump, do you want to see the differential? Because there will be a bump after they pay out of pocket for their master's program.
I mean, that's the analysis I think we have been missing for our teachers all along. If we were to show them it will cost you up front this many dollars and time to get your master's, but once you do that, you're going to end up finding that, and we have a chart on here that says, oh, you'll make $20,000 more a year, but that's not until they actually earn the master's, and then it depends on how long they're left before they hit retirement. We have second career teachers that are already 50 years old. So
I think you just have to do it presumed on the current cost of George Mason, and then if it goes down, it goes down. If they're able to do the UVA cost, fine. But just pick a cost that is and a stated cost, and then people can figure out the differential based on what they do.
We can do that, and then we can also add how much they would be making at the BA plus 15 and BA plus 30 bumps that they will get along the way.
that's fine. And then, and Dr. Braber, and this was the other question that I posed at the very beginning, and it's not on there. What is it going to cost this system in salary and benefits when we suddenly convert everybody over to master's degrees now? I mean, we got told how much it would cost us to grandfather in our bachelor's teachers, but if we shove them all into master's degree, let's say starting at step 15 and below, so bachelor 1 to bachelor step 15, they go get their master's degree. How much are we going to need in our salary funds to pay for now all these brand new 25% of our teachers are bachelors right now. We convert them all over to masters, and we have a much bigger
The new scale isn't
fund.
converting everybody over to masters. It's just a new BA lane, and this is the scale. Will it change the distribution of masters to bachelors? It's possible more people might migrate to masters. We'll see what analysis, maybe we'll look at other systems that have done things. People might still stay on the bachelors. Right, they're making an informed decision. They know what the different pay lanes are. It really depends a lot where your career was. I was a career switcher. I was still young. I knew I was about to have a family. I wanted to get to masters. A lot of people at the town hall said, you know what, Scott, back in the early 90s, the differential was small or smaller. It's not worth it. I've got other things in my life I need to do, want to do. So I think what we've got to do when we come back and finalize it is give clear guidance, give signage in the road as to what the decision points are, and be able to explain it in a clear way financially so that then our employees can make informed decisions.
Just like Ms. Huffman did this morning, even though it was highly unlikely, she gave the chart that said, should they have lack of accreditation or have 3 in all categories, it's not going to happen. But just hypothetically, I think it is reasonable to say, hypothetically, if we put in the Maryland model, which is we say, hey, look, we really want you to get your master's and we made it worth it, there's going to be a cost in the out years to the system. I think it's reasonable to anticipate what does that look like in the out years to our budget.
And Arlington is the same. Okay. All right, Ms. Strauss.
Yes, I think we're done. Yes?
I think I forgot one thing, Megan. In my bullet, second to the last one, third one, the $70 million, I think I did ask if the funding has to come within the given salary from other lanes, what would superintendent suggest? Recommendation be?
Where would you find
Because we need to know, when we make a decision, if we go that way, where will the money come from?
I hear you, Mr. Moon, but if it's something as small as $3 million a year, it wouldn't have to come from.
So I want to see.
It wouldn't have to be taking away from other teachers' pay. We can be pulling money.
No. My question to him is, without putting in additional resources, because that's exactly what you are saying, without putting additional resources for the salary, if it has to come from other lanes, where would he suggest that come from?
Okay. All right. I think we're done. Thank you all very much. And I think there's still pizza in the other room.